All right, we're going to go ahead and call to order the North Valley's Water Management Subcommittee of the Reno City Council for Monday, October 16th. It is 6:06 p.m. and we are going to go ahead and start with roll call. So we have Councilmember Dorr.
Here.
Ebert.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
You have a quorum. Moving on to item A2 is opening public comment. And
Do you want to fix this so she's in here? Do you want to move her to it so you can see on the screen? Yeah.
I just wasn't ready. I just have to read the disclosure. All right. You're all set? You're in the screen? Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open item A2, which is public comment. Thank you. If you want to speak, please make sure you fill out a blue form and bring it up here to me. So for members of the public, you may hear, observe, and provide public comment virtually by registering through the following link, which can be found on reno.gov/meetings. USBW. It should be noted for those in attendance that comments are to be addressed to the body as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the agenda. The body may not take action upon any matter not agendized on today's agenda. When you're called on for public comment, this is the microphone. Please state your name and begin speaking, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. For those participating in Zoom, if you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Our first public commenter today is Danny Cleus, followed by Denise Ross. And again, if you wouldn't mind just stepping up to the speaker so that everybody can hear you, including the recording.
Danny Cleus for the record. Just for facts, since 1982, the North Valley wasn't made for what the city of Reno has done to it. It was for country living. City of Reno made it a mess, a bigger mess. With all the snowfall and everything that the Sierras got, we didn't get as much out here in the valleys. For all the concrete, asphalt, everything else that you guys have done, you made a mess. It flooded in 2017. The court ruled you guys were liable for it. Right now, the county is building bigger berms around that lake because the lake will not drain ever again. Since 2017, that lake has been wet. Prior to 2017, that lake was dry. There's been reports on this that nobody wants to read, all the way from 1982. When Regional did their perfectly good study, they did water, they did dirt soil, they did everything to plan out what North Valleys was for. City of Reno didn't listen to that. The 90s, there was reports in the 90s about it. The Quad Knopf in the first part of 2000. Now the DRI study, and nobody wants to listen to it. The city of Reno, I really want to say this, but I can't, has their head stuck somewhere so far that they can't see what they're doing to the people out here. Why is that? Now that you guys have this big old mess, nobody can come up with an answer what to do with it. I can't afford to be flooded again. Because I don't have the money to hire another lawyer. And there's only a couple lawyers here in Nevada that will actually sue the city. That doesn't have ties with the city. That doesn't have ties with anybody, developers. That's the biggest problem. You guys with the city should be going to the legislator to take the power away from these guys. The developers have so much power. There's two places going in right now. One's Washoe County and one's the city of Reno, right there off of Military and one off of Lemon Drive. Those places should never be built. And they've been sitting there for a year now. So, I don't know. You guys keep screwing up, and you don't learn by your screw ups. So, what are you guys gonna do now? You can't blow smoke up our butts anymore. That's a perfect example of what you guys have been doing for the last 7 years.
Thank you, Danny. Our next public commenter is Denise Ross.
I need to talk, where's the microphone?
Just that whole thing is a microphone, so you're good.
My name is Denise Ross. I live in Lemon Valley. And I'm kind of concerned, well, I'm very concerned about the PFAS in the water. John Blanford, Mr. Dwayne Smith, Mr. Smith, Dwayne Smith. I'm asking you guys on record to investigate Sherman Williams for PFAS going into Swan Lake. You need to do a surprise inspection, and you also need to check out the paper company. And if you refuse to do that, you guys are the ones who are neglecting your jobs. City of Reno needs to take some responsibility for this. The PFAS are killing us. There's numerous people in the valley that have cancer. I started keeping a log of it. People have died. My own husband died. Man across the street from me died from lung cancer. I've got several friends in this area. Got one that lives on Lemon Drive that has leukemia, and I've got some other friends that are stage 4 cancer. How can you all just continue to deny to research into where it's coming from? It's all not from the foam, from the fireplace, or from the Stead fire practice place where they were doing that. You guys need to be responsible to find out where it's coming from. And like I said, I've got pictures of the crap that Sherman Williams is slushing into the ditches and the stuff that goes into the lake, or that goes into the ditches. Now, whether or not your sewer treatment plants clean it, I don't know, but I know you can't take the PFAS out. And I know that the PFAS are killing the people in my community. And I'm calling on you guys on record. I'm making you responsible, because I will go to the media big times if you guys don't step up and do it. And then the lawyers will be next. You're being advised now that you guys need to do inspections. Why would you just ignore it? It makes no sense to me. Our people are dying. You can't make it go away. You say, oh, well, it just stays in the water. Well, no, it blows up to my house too. It blows up to my friend's house. The people who were flooded, it goes into their property too. And I know you guys like to dick around with the numbers and say, oh, well, we only have minimal amounts. Okay, show us where the testing results are. Show us how much testing you have done. Show us what the results of those tests are.
Thank you, Denise. Any other public comments? All right, and we don't have anybody registered online, so we're gonna close out item A2, public comment. Was any correspondence received leading up to this meeting? No? No? Okay. We're going into item A3, approval of the agenda. So I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are passing unanimously. We're on item A4, approval of the minutes from January 25th, 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 25th, 2021.
Thank you. I have a
Second.
motion- Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we're moving on to our B items, selection of a chair and vice chair for the North Valley's Water Management Subcommittee. So I'm looking for a motion and a nomination.
I'll nominate Naomi for chair.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right, we have a motion for Councilmember Dewar to serve as chair. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and we're looking for a motion to nominate a vice chair.
Oh, I'd like to nominate Councilmember Ebert.
Second.
And for Councilmember Ebert as the vice chair. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, motion carries unanimously. So we're on item B2, and this is now your meeting, Chair Dewar.
Okay. All right. Well, first I want to welcome everyone. It's so good to see many of you. Many of you I get to work with regularly, and some of you are brand new to me, and some of you I know for many years of meeting and discussing issues. We have a really packed agenda, and there's really good in-depth data on here. And one of the things I like best about this committee, and I have served on it since its inception, is that we get to talk in a more informal way about issues that can affect the community. Although we run it basically as a regular meeting with the timelines and so on for public comment, we generally, the way it's worked is that when there's a presentation, people are able to ask questions. So not as much like a 3-minute public comment, but more of a Q&A. And the whole idea is to get information out into your hands so that you understand what's going on. It's not a hearing. We're not taking actions. I don't think we'll be having many motions. Virtually everything on the agenda is not for action. So the whole concept of this meeting is information exchange. If you leave here knowing something you didn't know when you got here, we have achieved our goal. And I already know from the agenda items that I will be learning a lot here tonight myself. So with that, what I'd like to do is just go briefly. I want to go over what the general topics on our agenda are tonight. We're going to get an update on from RTC on the construction updates, on Lemon Drive. That's item B2. On B3, we're going to talk about flood mitigation efforts, what's been happening in the last couple of years with Swan Lake flood protection methods, the Silver Lake Flood Action Plan, and the Swan Lake dewatering and irrigation pipeline update. There's also going to be an update on where the water levels are on Swan Lake and Silver Lake. We can look forward to that. We have the Western Regional Water Commission representative staff here today, and they have, at my request, I'm chair of that group, the Western Regional Water Commission. I have asked them to contract with a PFAS expert and for the whole entire region. And we're going to have a presentation on Wednesday at the Western Regional Water Commission on this big topic. So you're seeing it first here. And so we're all going to be learning together about PFAS. B6 is about what's going with development, what's happening with development up in North Valleys. The issues, are things stalled, or they're moving ahead, where they stand, and also where we stand with stormwater mitigation. And then on B7, we're going to have a brief update on the Reno-Stead Water Reclamation Facility, the expansion, the sewer allocation program. Some of you know about that. Flow shave, if you've heard that term, you'll hear a little bit more about it. And then the Advanced Purified Water Facility at American Flat. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think we can do all this in 2 hours. myself. And I actually, I got a glimpse of this agenda before they finalized it and posted it, and I said, there is no way that you can cover all this material in sufficient depth. So some of this may end up getting carried over. In fact, I think item B7, they've been having a series of workshops up here, and I don't know, has anyone attended those here that's in the audience today? Well, I know, John, you've had several workshops, and some of the team here, you've had some workshops, gonna have some more workshops. This item may end up getting carried over here today, just because I think we're gonna be short of time. I did hear that, the library's closed at this point. It's only open for our meeting. And so, we have a stop date or stop time, by 8 o'clock, which means we really have to get out of here about 5 or 8. So given all that, that's about hour and 45 minutes or so. I think we're gonna be pressed, but at least you know, the staff, we put this together, have a very, ambitious agenda. They want to get as much information out as possible. And we will have round 2, for whatever else we don't get to tonight. Okay. So with that, we'll go back to, item, B2, and I think I saw Dale. Hi, welcome, Dale.
Good evening.
And would you introduce yourself and just, you're gonna fill us in from RTC on some road development projects.
And make it even quicker, or really just, also next slide, how about that?
Yeah, you just raise your hand every time you want me to move the screen.
So, good evening, council members, Dale Keller, I'm the Director of Engineering with the RTC. Thank you for the opportunity to talk here tonight and talk about the projects we have in North Valleys. As we pull up the presentation, this is a good preview of what we're going to be presenting to the Ward 4 NAB here, same location on Thursday night. So I'll go through some of these introduction slides a little bit quicker. If you have any more interest about what's happening, more about RTC and what we do, come here, same place, Thursday evening for Councilwoman Ebert's ward here, and we'll have a good update. Next slide, please. Some of the things we do at RTC, we have Route 7 that goes to the North Valley, so you can take that all the way down to downtown Reno, our forestry station. We also offer flex ride service, anything that's shown in this gray area. We offer curb-to-curb service. Call the number up, we'll pick you up and deliver anywhere you want inside that gray area. Also, we do some other great programs such as senior bucks. So you get a $60 subsidy, gets reloaded automatically, works with any of our taxi services or Uber or Lyft. You use any time and reloads automatically every single month. So great service to use. If you have any interest, feel free to contact me. Also, our van pool program for carpooling and sharing routes to work. So we talk about projects and where these projects come from North Valleys. They come from 2 places. Back in 2017, we conducted this North Valleys multimodal transportation study that looked at both the short-term and long-term plans and what the transportation needs are for the North Valleys region. Also, we developed this long-term regional transportation plan that has an outlook for 30 years. And so we have outlook all the way up to 2050. And that was adopted back in March of 2021. Next slide, please. So a little bit more of the North Valleys multimodal transportation study. First off, we're looking to address safety issues and also provide different connections and new opportunities, both existing and future congestion. So this looked all the way, including what we have for US 395 widening with NDOT and working together collaboratively to incorporate their projects, as well as look at existing roadways. Where are people moving and coming from? So out of it, had a whole slew of projects, and this is a good map showing what has recently been completed from the RTC's perspective, which we show in highlighted in yellow. It might be difficult to read that we recently completed. First off is the improvements at Lemon Drive in the US 395 interchange, looking at the Virgin Diamond interchange, as well as widening Lemon Drive all the way up to Military Road. Also, we installed a signal at Beckworth and Northfield Drive, where the elementary school is, provide some safe crossing at that location. We've done numerous rehab projects around the area, Newport Lane, Golden Valley Road as an example. Items shown in green are what we have currently under design. So there's numerous projects I'll touch upon, and I'll highlight a few of them. For example, the North Virginia Street Capacity Project that goes all the way from Panther Drive, where it connects down to the university, all the way up to Stead. Also, we're looking to widen and do traffic improvements and safety improvements on Military Road. And lastly is we have a slide, and I'll talk about further, is the Lemon Drive traffic improvements and resiliency project, and what that project do is providing a safe and reliable roadway during the 100-year flood event around Swan Lake. Next slide, please. Actually, go back. One thing I want to highlight too, you see US 385 is all highlighted in different colors. NDOT just awarded the phase 1 of that contract to QED Construction to widen US 385 from North McCarran all the way to Golden Valley Road. And so that project will start construction either later this fall or early next spring. And the next phase has been fully funded of widening US 385 from Golden Valley all the way to Stay. So that's fully funded construction, and that will happen upon completion of phase 1. So some projects that are currently under construction, we are paving Sky Vista Parkway last week and this week, and we'll be wrapping up this project before snow falls this winter. Next slide. Here's some of the projects, pictures of what the project looks like. You can tell where the traffic that's on the left as we widen out to the right side of the picture. And so we're excited to get this project done. This also provides some safety improvements for the roundabout to the regional park, as well as incorporating some other signal improvements. All right, the Lemon Drive Improvement and Resiliency Project. This has been in the work and close coordination with the city of Reno and Washoe County. We're reconstructing 3.7 miles of Lemon Drive, and that's from Fleetwood Way, just south of where the elementary school is, all the way to Ramsey Way, where it really dead ends. It turns into a dirt road. Now, I want to emphasize, this is not a widening project. This is a resiliency project. So we're not widening the road. We're just reconstructing the road that is going to be above the 100-year flood. We recognize that the existing road is in repair, and it's for us to ignore repair. We don't want to rebuild something that is acceptable to floods. So the thought process is realign Lemon Drive just to the west, as you see on the picture, on the natural berm. And where we stand with this project and what we plan to do, we are starting the environmental process. We reached out to the CAB meeting, North Valley's Citizen Advisory Board with the county, we're doing so with the NAB, and we're going to start the environmental process. We're going through all the environmental studies that's required of us through the federal government and federal regulations. And so we're beginning this process this fall and the next spring. We will have a public hearing, get more input from the public, some more information to come on this project. We do anticipate construction beginning in 2025 after we complete the environmental process as well as the project. And I want to point out the last bullet point is creating that safe transportation for all modes of transportation. So we're also reconstructing that shared use path that was maybe deteriorated with all the flooding that occurred. So that also be reconstructed as part of this project. So big picture wise, we zoom back out a little bit. Here's the projects we identified in the short term, midterm, and long term. So first off, looking at the short term projects that's been in the works from that 2021 to 2025 timeline. We talked about all the projects, so everything that we're been going after or been designing and constructing. There you see on the yellow and orange as well as that green with NDOT. The purple area, that's all private development driven out there off of White Lakes Parkway and Chase Canyon. In the interim time frame, once again, same with the project you see overall beginning, there are different phases of design and or construction. All these projects have been started under design and anticipate construction. We also see there on number 12 is improvements along North Hills Boulevard as we start looking at that connection. As then we go further to the west, we look into Moya and Red Rock Road.
But is it still just one way in and out? Are you going to put another way in or out?
In and out of.
Well, if we're all trying to go to the freeway, it's a mess.
Good point. And so that's great. For North Valleys, you have to go into town, even if you want to go to Spanish Springs.
You can't get to Spanish Springs back from Chickadee.
Correct. And so you see this green big line. We performed a study from Lemon Drive to Spanish Springs Connector Road. We narrowed it down to 3 different planning alternatives. So we're going to take that and see if we can advance that further. Now there's talk about you go from Chickadee to Eagle Canyon, or is there other routes we want to look into? I can provide you some more information about where that study lies, but that is in our out of the years. We're trying to find what the best alignment to connect those valleys. Once again, you're correctly said there's one way into town and one way out. So how can we create better connection both east and west?
So if I'm seeing that right, we won't get any help until like 2030 on that road? 2050?
Good question. And all this is variable. So as we look into our closer years, those are the projects that we have funding for. As we continue to move along, we look at where the priorities and what the RTC board sets as our priorities. we can start addressing some of these other issues of connections.
I don't mean to be negative, Nelly, but down south, they get everything. And we really get nothing down here.
I'm gonna just address that for a sec. So, some of you don't know, but I'm a Reno council member. My area goes to South Reno. It starts in Moana Lane, goes all the way down to Mount West Highway. It's not my fault, but what I have done, I've been on council, this is my 9th year. And, when I got there, to your point, the roads were a mess. And the residents were complaining, they had tremendous growth down there, all the suburbia, thousands of people moving into South Reno. So what I did, and I think this is what Megan will be doing, Councilmember Ebert, is I asked RTC to do a specific study on South Reno. And this is about 6 years ago now. The study was completed around the 2018 timeframe, I want to say. And I think that they've worked on 1, maybe 2 projects, and they're finally going to take a stab at a bigger project, which is widening Steamboat Parkway. But it takes a long time to get these projects onto RTC's planning schedule and then onto the construction schedule. So it may seem like that, but there's some 30 or 40 projects that they've identified in this South Reno road study that are yet to come, that the residents have gotten in meetings like this, actually hundreds of residents in schools, to actually draw on maps where the trouble points are. So it may seem like that, but they are struggling as well, but it's all got to start somewhere. And I think it's starting with these projects that you're doing right now. And
It should have been done before all the building.
I hear you.
It should have been done.
That's what they say now.
Now, slap in our face when the south gets what they have.
So back to you, Dale.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, would you state your name for the record?
Mona Whitman.
Mona Littman, thank you.
Let's start. That completes my presentation. Happy to answer any of the questions. Let's again come back here on Thursday for the NAP 4 presentation. We can spend a lot more time talking about this district.
Just say your name and then.
Danny Cletus. That new interchange that you guys put on from Lemon Drive to the highway, that's the worst cluster ever. We've had more accidents on that on-ramp for the 50 years that I've been living out in that valley. It took me, and I wasn't even I was past military. It took me an hour to go from about the middle of the bend to Sky Vista and Buck Drive, because there was an accident on the on-ramp. That, we never had that ever happen before. There's been 3 semis stuck on that on-ramp. One flipped over, one stuck on the ice, and another one stuck on the ice. And with all the cars. Now, with that over, what you guys are gonna do out there where I live and live and drive, you're not doing anything. That ground that you wanna put your road on the berm is the same crap that Lemon Drive is on right now. It's just deeper. It's silt. It's gonna move. You're not doing anything special. And if you're gonna make that four lanes wide, I know why. It's because the airport is gonna put in aviation warehouses out there, and you want truck traffic to come down Lemon Drive. We don't want that. We live in the country. It was meant to be in the country. We don't want that. Nobody out there wants that. And as far as Chickadee going to Spanish Springs, all that is for the developers. And you can ask Dwayne Smith, because he's the one that said it. They want all that land out there so they can develop more homes. So what's that going to do in the future for the traffic?
The flooding.
And the flooding? It's just going to make it even worse. And this goes back to what I said, 1982 regional. This area wasn't made for what you guys are doing to it.
I just want to clarify for the Lemon Drive project, we're not widening 4 lanes. It's going to be 1 lane in each direction.
Well, it should be 3 lanes, because you need a turning lane in there.
There'll be a center turn lane.
But you're putting it on land that's gonna be just as bad, if not worse, than what Lemon Drive is on right now. Because Lemon Drive's been raised twice since I've lived out there. And they keep on putting in base, and it keeps on sinking. What do you think that berm is gonna do right next to the lake?
Well, I think you're bringing up some good points, Danny, and I think Dale will take this back to his team. I mean, the fact that if there's not sufficient base and it's a very, soft material, you know, they're building on, I'm sure they wanna look at that, and I'm sure you don't wanna build roads that create more accidents. But, you know, nobody's perfect, and I've seen it before too, sometimes things are built, and we say, you know what, it should be designed a different way or built a different way, and I could think of something like the roundabout down south, you know, off Veterans, you know.
All roundabouts should be demolished.
Well, some pretty good, actually,
No.
but, the one that we have off Kitski and Neal functions extremely well.
No,
Passes about 60,000 cars. But anyway,
Hey,
did you
Tracy.
want to say something?
Well, mine was along the same lines of that on-ramp,
And it's Denise.
yeah, Denise Ross side, whenever we first saw the schematics for that, Danny looked at it and he's like, it's not gonna work. Just the way that it angles, when it gets icy and snowy, everyone slides. It's just the way it is. And you've got people trying to merge. You've got trucks and cars and everybody's late to work and everybody's already spinning out. And we've got those stoplights right before it and everyone's trying to get taken off. And to make that turn, it's not safe. And we went to you guys and told you that. We told you, it's not gonna work. This is why. You don't wanna listen. You don't wanna hear it. And it's so frustrating for us because now we're living with the consequences for that. Every time any of us, every time my son goes to work, it's like, I have to have him text me to make sure he gets there safely because of how horrible the roads are now. What you guys have done with that stupid on-ramp and the off-ramp. I mean, it's still backed up whenever you're trying to get off Lemon Drive, you know, it hasn't fixed anything and you've got, I don't know what it takes to get, it won't get fixed because it's past that now, so.
Well, I
we're
think
happy to
it's-
advise you about this, and give you some ideas about what the soil is. We've got books and records.
We already did this over a year ago when you had your thing at the Lemon Valley School. I talked to you exactly, and I told you, it's not gonna work. And because I do not have, and this is gonna be against everybody here in a minute, just not you. Everything that I have said over the past 7 years to the city, to the county, to RTC, I've even gone to RTC meetings in the past. This came true. Now, because I don't have some stupid initials past my name saying I went to college, I'm ignored. But everything I've said so far has come true. Now, I just don't sit back and make it up. I actually do the research. I mean, I've been reading reports off of a phone. You know, I don't have a computer, I got a phone. I read the whole damn report. I know what it takes out here, because I've lived here so long, what it takes to make everything work. And just like you wanna put that road on the berm? No, and that's the craziest thing I ever heard. And the on-ramps, who told you about that on-ramp? That on-ramp has a bump in it,
Really?
and it throws everybody to the right. You got a nice sweeping curve coming from, if you're going north on Lemon Drive, you got a nice sweeping curve. That's how a paint truck overturns. You'll see a whole bunch of white paint there. You got the other way where it's too sharp and people can't get over that hump. And if they do, they end up into the next lane.
So I'm gonna suggest something, it sounds like Danny has a lot of very practical information to share. And it sounds like there may need to be some improvements to the road over time. So I'm gonna suggest, Dale, that you do get on a one-on-one with Danny and or Denise and just talk really detailed about the road with your engineers. Because there's nothing like combining practical knowledge with engineering knowledge to get the best answer. Right? Let me ask, is there anyone else that wanted to make a comment or ask a question on the North Valley roads that have been just discussed? Yes, ma'am.
Do people, my name is Jody Poole,
Thank you.
do you guys drive during the commute hours and see what the everyday people see and experience it? Or I don't know how that works.
Yes, and so, I mean,
Show
from a
me.
practicality, we see what the reports tell us, we see what the models tell us, but for us, we also want to drive it. Like,
Uh-huh.
drive it during winter conditions, during summer conditions, during when it's congestion congestion starts at, I think, about 2 o'clock, right? 2 o'clock, even past 6 o'clock.
And 5 till 8.
Right, and so how do we help mitigate that? And how do we partner with NDOT to find ways to push that traffic off the freeway and onto the arterials better as well, both coming, I think, northbound and also in the morning. We have to recognize in the morning, especially when we have winter events, is that, or wind events. So the two big things, the ice and winds, that there always, it seems, almost every week, there's either somebody off the roadway for whatever reason. So how do we provide better messaging that we can get out there or get the maintenance crews with NDOT to go ahead and go plow or salt or sand the US 395
I
portion?
think
So,
the biggest thing is there's nowhere to go when something like that happens. You're just stuck sitting there for hours.
and we're hoping by doing a widening that North Virginia piece, if it's an accident on US 385, we can jump down on North Virginia and bypass that accident.
No, I won't want
That's,
It's not gonna solve all the problems, but it will help alleviate that.
it takes you 2 hours to go from North Virginia into town. It takes you 2 hours if there's an accident. In the nice dry weather. In the winter, it's even worse.
Is there anyone else that, anybody who speaks, you got the blue form if you can fill that out. Is there anyone else who wanted to comment or ask a question of Dale while he's here tonight? No? Okay, well, it sounds, yes, go ahead. Would you say your name?
My name is Miles Poole. I live on Lemon Drive in between Arizona and Idaho. I was kind of right in the middle of the last drive here. So this new road you're talking about is gonna cut across the berm of the lake and will be way off of the main roadway. Lemon Drive will detour.
And the connections that are still there today onto Lemon will still exist. They might be a little bit further away. And the current residents who live on Lemon Drive will having more of a neighborhood street, so you would not have the main traffic go through, and those we have other connections back where. there's more neighborhood street. And I can show you some great details.
They're going to extend Arizona and Idaho and all those out further to connect them to Lemon Drive. Is there a map online to?
There is, and part of the public process, we'll have some public hearings and provide information and mailers out when we're gonna have it, and also websites to go to, and also in-person meetings, most likely they're here or over at the Lemon Valley Elementary School.
So that big slough that's in there in between, is that gonna get filled in with backfill or?
Those are the details that we need to either have more public input with, or also further design to understand what's the best solution.
And it sounds like you're gonna be talking about this again on Thursday,
Yeah.
the same exact thing in more detail. Okay. That sounds good. And would you bring maps or a link to what's on the web at that time? Okay. And if you want to get that in the interim, like where to find it, maybe after this meeting, or do we have a link to the RTC
Yes.
website?
Yeah, either rtcwashout.com or type in northvalleys.improvements.com. And that shows all the maps I showed, what projects under construction have been completed, they're all there. And there's a specific link to Lemon Drive that has more additional information.
So you may want to check that before Thursday if you plan to come on Thursday, just to kind of get a lay of the land. That's what I recommend. Well, what I'm gonna do, and if it's okay, Denise, we have so much to cover. What I'd like to do is thank you, Dale, for coming and giving us a glimpse of what's going on. I know it's important because it does ultimately affect what's happening water-wise in this area. So thanks for that baseline.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have no action
No.
plan. So we're gonna move on to on to B3, which is a presentation on flood mitigation efforts. And not sure who all is doing this. It looks like Dwayne Smith.
I'll take it. Maybe other people join me.
Okay. You guys want to just come up and sit up for
here we
Why
go.
don't we go ahead and introduce your panel here?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. For the record, Wayne Smith. I'm the Director of Engineering at Washoe County. Thank you for coming out tonight. I think this is a very good time to start reaffirming the good work that both the county and the city, and as you just heard from Dale, RTC, on some of the projects and some of the efforts that we are all undertaking for the benefit of the residents and the people that live and work in the Lemon Valley area. And I would also say that the timing on this is pretty good, because what I want to mention to you is a little bit about flood protections and some of the things that we're continuing to do at Washoe County in collaboration with the city to help protect the residents in the area. And of course, we're stepping right now into the winter time. So that's my introduction.
Hi, I'm Teresa Jones. I'm a senior engineer with the City of Reno and Flood and Drainage, and I'll be presenting just a couple slides on the update of the Silver Lake Flood Action Plan.
And hi, everybody, I'm Joe Couturier, also at City of Reno with the Utility Services Department, along with Teresa, engineer, and can speak to reservoir expansion. We have another gentleman, Nick, he'll come up as well, talk about that, talk about effluent management, a quick recap potentially on the advanced purified water facility. We'll touch on our sewer allocation program, and we'll talk a little bit about Swan Lake, Silver Lake, Swan Lake water service allocation.
Thank you.
Go for it.
So I hope if nothing else that you take away tonight from the things that I'm going to speak on, are just to reaffirm with you the good hard work that the county has been doing over the last 7 years related to the flood protections in and around specifically Swan Lake. Now, of course, there are other flood protections that we've done in other areas of the county as well, but I want to really focus our discussion tonight on Swan Lake. The picture that you see on the screen shows the three primary closed basins in the North Valleys here. So we have Swan Lake to the east, in the center we have Silver, and to the north and to the west we have Whites Lake. This kind of shows the direction that we see the predominant flow patterns from precipitation. This is the snow and the rain that come down out of the mountains that ultimately go to the lowest portions of the valleys, and those are those closed basins. So again, I want to just bring up a few points regarding Washoe County's flood response plan and the things that we're both currently doing and will continue to do through this next winter, this next water year. So of course, our goal, our directive is to manage Swan Lake within its current boundaries. So we've certainly come a long way from where we were in 2017, the first months of 2017. And ultimately, the Board of County Commissioners and the county manager continue to direct us to keep the residents safe, to keep the roadways open, and to minimize the impact to public infrastructure. And we do that through our action plan, which includes a variety of things, including water level monitoring, the flood barriers. As a matter of fact, just this week, you saw Washoe County crews out doing additional work. But we had done a lot of work at the beginning of this year. We had hoped that the lake would not come up as much as it has. And we were hoping that we would see more evaporation of the closed basins. We didn't see that. So appropriately, Washoe County initiated the next phase of raising of barriers. So you probably saw equipment and trucks out starting Wednesday. We've also purchased an additional couple of high flow pumps. These are really critical for us to be able to quickly and respond appropriately when we see flood actions and make sure we get out in front of those. HESCO barriers are always a part of a rigorous flood management strategy. So we do have HESCO barriers installed at along Pompey and at the end of Pompey. We also have additional barriers in storage ready to go along with the material so that we can place those as needed. Of course, we can't do any of this without budget authority. And this is where the Board of County Commissioners and the leadership of the county have really stepped up to make sure that we have sufficient funding to manage and act within our response plan. And of course, we are committed, as always, to getting the information out in the best ways possible to our community. Thanks. Now, I just mentioned budget authority. I think it's important
that we reaffirm some of the commitment here. So on the far right, you see that really thin blue line, and then you see the green and the blue columns there. Since, for the last 7 years, since 2017, Washoe County has expended about a little over $17 million fighting floods throughout Washoe County. That's equipment, that's people, that's the efforts that we have stepped up to make sure that our residents are safe and protected. What's really interesting is, and we have it captured here, is Lemon Valley. This includes also our efforts at the wastewater treatment plant, because we raised those barriers and berms to protect the wastewater treatment plant. But we've expended over $14 million just here in the North Valleys in and around Swan Lake since 2017.
Wayne, can you say what the two colors mean? It's hard to read the key.
The green
Yeah.
is the total county expenditure. So here we have fiscal years, or excuse me, calendar years 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 across the bottom. Those are totaled on the far right column. The blue is what we spent here in Lemon Valley. That includes both public works activities and the utility activities.
So blue is just Lemon Valley.
Blue is just Lemon Valley. Councilman.
And then this far right is the total of all of those. So how many years is that? Looks like 5 or 6 or 7 years. Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. Now you recall that when we initially constructed barriers and protections around Swan Lake in 2017, for those of you that live out here or visited during that time, there were HESCO barriers up against Lemon Drive, right? What a pain, for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
There were barriers along the south side of Lemon Drive as well. Not only were they impediments and created challenges, both from standing water on the roadways and just the proximity to traffic, they really limited our ability to respond quickly when we saw big storm events, because there was very little storage area to allow our pumps to pick that water up and put it into the lake. So with a little bit of time, we did see, and I do have a graph coming up that will show you that, we saw Swan Lake, like all the closed basins, drop in elevation, right? The water evaporated, it absorbed into the ground. When that happened, we reevaluated our barrier system in and around Lemon Valley. And it was determined that those barriers were not sufficient anymore. I could not trust those barriers if we saw the same water levels that we'd seen before. So when we deconstructed the HESCO barriers, when we deconstructed the pumps and the piping, we also developed a plan by which we installed new barriers. And those barriers were installed strategically in these areas that you see in red to allow for those required protections, but also to create more, I'll call them forebay areas. When we saw water come down out of the mountains and collect, we had more response time in those areas so that we could pump that water in the lake. What I didn't show in here, and this kind of goes back to what Dale was talking about, thank you, Dan. And what Dale was talking about with the relocation of Lemon Drive along the top of the barrier there on the right side or on the east side. What we've effectively done is place barriers in and around the lake using that natural barrier as well down along the southern portion of the lake, and captured a process, built barriers and secured the lake within that lake area. I just want to quickly show a few of these pictures. So that where you are now is you're at the south end of the lake. You're looking to the north. In the middle there is the upper middle is the Washoe County, the small Lemon Valley wastewater reclamation facility. You can see the access road on the left side, and then you can see the berm coming across this area and then tying down in onto Lemon Drive. You can actually see a 12-inch pump sitting out there on the top of that barrier. So this is an example of relocating the barriers away from Lemon Drive, right? Remember, as you're driving out there in 17, 18, 19, 20, those barriers were right up against Lemon Drive today. This now takes the place of those HESCO barriers along Lemon Drive and creates this storage area that allows the flows that come down out of the mountains to pick those up quickly and move those into the main part of the lake. Next slide, please. This is looking to the west toward the school. The school, of course, we work collaboratively with the school district And that is a big focus of our action plan. So you can see, one thing I'll quickly note is you can see a sewer manhole out there. We also raised all the sewer manholes to make sure that we weren't seeing input from floodwater coming into the manhole flushing. Next slide, please. Here we are at the north end of the lake. This is Pompey. So we're actually to the north looking south. So that's Pompey. And so this area shows those HESCO barriers along the eastern side of Pompey and down along the very end. And I'll just point out that there's a couple of inflatable barriers in and around one of the residents down here. We installed those as well. And we are replacing one of those inflatable barriers that has been ordered. Next slide, please. Now we're still in the same area. So Pompey is to the left, but this is looking to the north. So now you can see this large, what I refer to as the L berm, that comes across and behind the private properties here, and then connects with the Gene Way berm to the north. And one more slide, if any. And this is on the eastern side of the lake. So you can kind of see some of the industrial buildings back over there and the residential development over here on the left. What you're looking at here is two white trucks down on a little extension of area that we built. And we've placed this area so that we could put a pump to capture all the water that would come down from the east side and then pump it over into the lake. Next slide, please. So again, just to reaffirm what our response plan is this is an ongoing process, right? These closed hydro basins, the only way for the water to leave them is evaporation or infiltration. And this is the way they've worked. We're known as the basin and range state, right? So we're a series of closed basins and ranges. Our barriers that we have reconstructed and continue to raise, again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, they were constructed in optimal locations. This allows for the roadways, Lemon Drive, Pompey, all the other areas to stay open during these high water events that we're continuing to see. The board and the county manager have been very clear on their directives to us, and backing up their directives, they provided sufficient capital for us to continue to manage these efforts. We continue to monitor and measure changes in the closed basins, not just in the North Valleys, but also in North Spanish Springs. We have a small one out there called Boneyard Flat. You probably weren't aware of that, but we also monitor that closed basin as well. And of course, as I put down here in the bottom, this is all in alignment with the direction that staff has received from our leadership. And I would like to think that these efforts have proven themselves. We've learned a lot over the last 7 years, and these approaches allow us to keep our residents safe, keep roadways open, and allow us to continue to do the good work out here in the Lemon Valley and the North Valleys area.
So we're gonna take this, is that it?
I think so.
Okay, so I have a question, maybe this other people do too. What do you think this winter's looking like?
I think we've got some slides coming up to talk a little bit about the projections.
Okay, so if I could summarize what you said, it sounds like you spent a lot of money, that you've tweaked your response, you've moved these HESCO barriers away from the roads out towards the lake, but then they're higher, I guess, to stage the water up. And is there another main point that you would like? I mean, you've spent a lot of money and you've tweaked your response. Is there one more thing maybe?
Well, I think that you're hitting on all of those things, and ultimately the reason we're doing it, we're going to continue to do it. That's why I put right at the top, this is a multi-year event. This is not a one and done.
Sure.
You know, so our commitment is there, our budgets
So
reflect
you've
that.
transitioned from emergency response to more programmatic planning to deal with it on the long term. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's a great way to say it. I think better said than.
Okay, well, good. So let's see, I'm gonna start back here and we'll move from. Yeah,
So
and say your name again.
Mona, it sounds like nothing permanent coming. We're gonna always be chasing our tail and chasing the water and chasing the lake and putting out more barriers and sending more water from the sewage plant away.
Well,
So we're just gonna, there will be no permanent solution.
Well, I think, Mona, you're bringing up a great point, and let me just make a couple of comments to that. Dealing with and challenges associated with these closed basins
But you guys knew they were closed when you started this mess.
are definitely big, right?
Yeah.
And so now we have another consideration, and you're gonna hear a presentation here just in a few minutes from a national expert regarding the PFAS issue, because that's added a layer of complication,
Right.
right, into what we're dealing with. And there's a couple of things that I didn't mention, but I'll mention based on the question. First of all, we initiated a home purchase program. And
Didn't help me.
well, I appreciate that, but it certainly has helped those that have been, that are directly
Right,
adjacent
right.
to and had flood impacts during the 2017 flooding. Now, we recognize,
Let's let him, okay.
so we certainly recognize the benefits of that. We also recognize that that's a part of the program that needs to continue. So we're working currently with State DEM, Department of Emergency Management, under their grant programs, because these are not inexpensive things, to continue to develop resources to continue to purchase more homes in those critical areas. Another project that we're working on is to help capture some of the flows that come out of the mountains on the north end, Pepner 5 above. And so we received some preliminary funding for the design and the permitting to create a large detention basin above the Hepner 5 development. And we're looking forward to making improvements, not only because of that, but to the drainage systems that come down and ultimately bring that water into the storm area. On the long term, certainly working with the city of Reno and with our other partners, yes, there is a definite need to address these long-term strategies. While the barriers work, when we be clear, while the barriers work, we wouldn't be spending that kind of money if they weren't effective. But we all want to find that right long-term solution, that affordable long-term solution. And I think with the current issues that we have with PFAS, that's going to help direct us in the right way to go. So I can't tell you exactly what we're going to be doing because we're developing those processes. We have some work to do. We definitely have some work.
That's very informative. There were some more questions up here. Okay. So, and then we'll come right to you, sir.
Why do you come up with all these solutions and things? Why not address the problem that is causing this, of all of the building and all of the water runoff? You guys continue to allow more and more development to go in before you even corrected any of this. It makes no sense to me. And then you want to buy our homes? You want to buy our lives? That's sickening. It's disgusting. What if I wanted to go buy your life and your property because I thought I should be able to drive on it? You and the city are flooding the homes and the lives of the people that have been out there for years. And you guys justifying that now you're going to come and buy us out? That's nice of you. That's really nice of you. But why do we have to move? Why can't you guys stop doing what destroys our lives? It doesn't make sense. And now the PFAS, and you guys, you're not going to stop anything. You want to go on with RTC and stir up more crap in the lake and put roads. What happens to the dust? What happens to the water? What happens to the rest, to us that have to keep breathing it in when you guys are playing your game? It's not fair. It's not right. Like I said, what if it were your life in your home?
So you made a very passionate statement, and I've heard you, and I think others have. Do you also have a question for Dwayne? I heard a lot of why in there. Why do you keep doing it before the development?
Why?
Or while development's keeping a pace, right?
Right.
Development's
It's
over.
never gonna, are you planning, how are you ever gonna catch up? If you continue to allow more and more development going in, and you haven't even caught up to the 2017 flood and Wise and House. When is it gonna be enough? When are you gonna catch up?
Let me see if I can answer or kind of give a little bit of perspective on a couple of things. We're all concerned about PFAS. And that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we brought a national expert to our area, committed to helping us understand, because there's a lot of misunderstanding right now, to help us understand what we're really up against, where it's coming from, what can be done, what are the best practices that are done across the country. I certainly look forward to that part of the presentation. But I do want to acknowledge your comments about dust, acknowledge your comments about the water, and acknowledge the comments about where potentially the sources of the PFAS are. Those are all the same questions that we're diving into. And I think our commitment regionally, with the presence of us here tonight and with all these people, help us to collaboratively and jointly address those issues. So I'm looking forward to that. And there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done forward. Some of the challenges are with development. I believe Andrew was probably going to speak a little bit more to that. But both Washoe County and the city of Reno have put into place additional regulations and requirements associated with detention and retention basins, building within floodplains, those pieces. And why I see you smiling, I will tell you that those are meaningful, or we wouldn't be doing those things. So I appreciate the fact that it really is, in a lot of ways, feels like catch-up, right? It feels like catch-up. I think we can see that in a lot of areas of our county and our cities when we're dealing with these types of things. And historically, we've never had these issues that we're dealing with right now with these flooding issues like we're dealing with. So I certainly want you to know that these are active programs. As we continue to show, we expend appropriate money to help and maintain the protections for the people while we continue to develop the long-term strategies for how these things ultimately get resolved. I think Councilmember Dewar mentioned this earlier in one of her comments that when she was talking about roadways and issues in the South Drake Meadows. These are complicated issues. These are things that take a lot of input and a lot of unintended consequences as well come out of it. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we continue to jointly work through these things.
Can I ask you real quick, would you do something for me? And I smile about the detention ponds. Next time we get a really good downpour going, I'll call you and I'd like to meet with you. And I'll drive with you. And we're not gonna be fighting and arguing. It's just to show you what is working and what isn't working. Because there's a lot that's not working that you don't see.
I think that's a great offer. That's very timely. I think there's not just one person who want to see that, but several come out. I mean, that's when a lot of stormwater work happens in the middle of the rain, right? When it's happening.
No.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Day after,
well, what I'm saying is,
but they don't go out there in the rain.
no, but people that I work with in stormwater do go out in rainstorms to measure. So let me, let me ask you.
Alan Levinson, I have a question.
And it was Al.
Okay. Speaking of the long-term strategy that you're talking about, are you guys thinking about the climate change patterns and the severe storms that are not like, this is not what we see usually, but for the long term, every prediction is saying that we're gonna see more and more frequency of these. Are these barriers taken into consideration about these extreme weather? I mean, we can't wait until they evaporate because if you have big quantities. Have you thought of that?
Yeah, you're touching on something that, Al, that we think about actually quite a bit, because what we're seeing now in our storms, our weather patterns are these intense, warmer winters where we see a lot more flow, and instead of absorption into the ground, instead of the snowpacks and allowing that to absorb in the ground, we're seeing them as runoff. So our flood action plans in the North Valleys to help protect the residents in these areas. We've established certain elevations on the barriers. For instance, around Swan Lake, that elevation is 4926. Currently, the water level's at about 4920, which is about 6 feet, so our barrier system is about 6 vertical feet above that. Of course, as you look at a lake, the lake expands, the volumes, you get more volume for every foot of increase. But I mention this because in establishing that 4926, we were going back looking at all the available data and then making some projections, including consideration such as the warmer wet winters. But like with anything, we still have to continue to monitor, we still have to continue to measure, we still have to continue to respond to. So I'm not gonna tell you that that 4926 is the final number.
Was there another
Yeah.
comment or question? Something, Dan? Did you say your name? Okay.
Danny Cleus. You saying you're playing catch up? You guys have known about this from the Quad report since 2007. They actually lined out what to do, how much it would cost, and nobody listened to them. Multiple different things to do. And your little thing where the water's coming from, you're missing 2 big ones. It's just not coming down from the north through our neighborhood. It's also coming from the east in 2 sections bigger than what it comes down through our neighborhood. And you would know that from the DRI report. Now, you guys have known this. I have caught you in millions of lies over the past 7 years, Dwayne.
Danny, I'm gonna ask you to.
No.
I am.
No, this is about what's happening here. Now, last winter, this year, you guys were scrambling to put up your barriers. Scrambling, Dwayne. You were way behind the 8 ball. And if you would have done everything right from the road, you could have went 50 feet in and did all your barriers. Right now, you confine that lake smaller than what it is. You don't have enough capacity to keep building your berms up. What are you gonna do? That brand new sluice that you guys put in? Are you gonna, because it's backed up into that. Are you guys gonna block that off and start pumping it in like a pool?
Okay, let's let
I
him.
mean, come on.
So something about the slough,
I'm not familiar with what.
not
you're saying.
familiar. Okay.
The drainage ditch that
But
runs
I would
right
say
in there.
that, what Mr. Cleus brings up is in terms of a just-in-time approach.
Okay.
I think all counties and cities probably, are very respectful of our available budgets and funding. And so when we make decisions based on our program, based on our flood action plan, because we prefer not to spend money that we don't need to spend. So we spend that money just in time. And so I think this Wednesday, when you saw equipment and trucks out working, that's another good example of, we're out in front of it. We're making sure that the residents are being protected, making sure the roadways stay open. But we needed to wait and determine based on elevations of the lake, based on weather patterns, based on predictions, based on input from professionals that we would then pull the trigger at the right time. So I will disagree with you that I have not scrambled. I have been very careful in the efforts to minimize the public dollar expenditures while still meeting the directives of the county manager and the county commission.
If you guys
So
would
I
have listened at
appreciate-
17, you
I
would have saved a
appreciate the
whole
fact
bunch of
that,
money.
that we are able to do that in an effective way.
So, I'm probably one of the people I've lived here, of everybody in the room, the longest, not the longest, but one of. Going back to, I moved here in the 70s, and there was a report also done in the 80s about needed drainage improvements, and I think that Dwayne is really getting at an important point. There is always this much to do and this much money. And it's really a challenge of prioritizing and trying to understand. And then we're working in a very changing environment. We have tremendous development pressure. People have brought it up throughout, but we also have a completely changing climate. And it's happening here faster than just about anywhere. We are the fastest warming state by a group called Climate Central, and Reno in particular, fastest warming city in America. So we seem to be kind of ground zero for these kind of challenges. And I don't know that anybody had a, the ability to anticipate exactly how this would all fold out or when, how fast. But it's certainly happening now, and I do want to give you some kudos for trying to be responsive and trying to get out ahead of it and getting your folks out now, for example. It's October, it's not November and January. So that I really appreciate, because that tells me that you're spending time looking forward and trying to be proactive instead of the reactivity that we've seen, let's say, going back to the 2017, 2018, 2019 timeframe. So let me ask, again, I'm keeping my eye on the clock. I know we have two more presentations here. Want to quickly hear about the water levels, but I really do want to make sure we get enough time to talk about the PFAS before the end of the meeting. So let me ask our two colleagues from Reno. Did you have something to add for us today?
I think Dwayne did a good job of outlining pretty much what City of Reno is doing. We have our 4-part action plan, monitoring stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. The monitoring starts at 4963 lake elevation for Silver Lake, 0.27, oh yeah. Can you, yeah, thank you.
I was gonna say, it's very hard to put that.
Yeah. Very good. And so 4964 is when our monitoring starts. The lake level is at 4963.27. We've already started. We've updated this Silver Lake Action Plan earlier this year. We had meetings with Public Works, our maintenance and operations folks, and utility services to incorporate lessons learned. Getting out in front, we've started coordinating with businesses, Washoe County, ordering, inspecting the berms, the HESCO barriers, getting new pumps, all of that stuff. So we started that. Next slide, please.
Can I ask, when we do future slides, can we not have that level of fine print? Just send me if you want us to read it. Okay,
Certainly.
that would be helpful. But I'm just reading the top line, and what you're saying, I think, is that you start monitoring at this 4964?
Yes.
Okay,
And right now we're at 4963.27. So we've already started. We're out
Okay.
ahead of our action plan.
okay.
And the action plan is short term, immediate. And then, of course, like Dwayne mentioned, the longer term regional solutions that are being worked on as well between the two agencies. So this is stage 1 that happens at 4966. We coordinate with the businesses, urban outfitters, FOSDEC, tell them to get their private berms and HESCO barriers in place. The City of Reno puts in their HESCO barrier and the earthen berm there, install a pump. And then for stage 2, I want to make sure that everybody gets
That's the next one.
yes,
Okay.
that's the next slide, yes. We increase as the Silver Lake water levels increase to 4968. We put in more barriers, more pumps, both private, again, coordinating with the private business owners out there, as well as the City of Reno. And then at 4970, next slide, is stage 3, and that's where we Washoe County comes in, and they put in their pipes. They're pumping their HESCO barriers there at the north end of Silver Lake. So that's our 4th stage action plan. A lot of coordination with all parties involved.
Let me ask, and I should have done this earlier. I know we have Councilmember Taylor on the line and Councilmember Ebert. Do you have questions for either of the two speakers that we just had at this time? Not at this time. And okay, just one second. Ms. Taylor?
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay, and then was that it, Teresa?
That's it,
Part? Do
yes.
you want to go or?
Yeah, I'm sensing some urgency. I think pretty quickly we can look at the slide for Swan Lake, show the water surface elevation.
Okay.
Then I can also discuss quickly this Swan Lake dewater.
Okay, and then I'll open for questions for a few minutes. Okay.
So the Swan Lake dewatering line is a irrigation pipeline that goes from Swan Lake to the American platform. It's the farm that the city operates through an operator, and it's located just north of the Reno State Airport. You can see the time frame from April 2020 approximately to this year in April. That was pumping water from Swan Lake with the intent of drawing the lake down. So in April of 2023, so this year, We put it on hold because of our water quality concerns. So this farm's still being kept alive. There's another water source, but in terms of the water being taken from Swan Lake right now to that American platform, that's not occurring at the moment. And so, and we are currently investigating, you know, potential future water quality treatment processes that could allow us to, could we get this dewatering system functioning again? So that's something we're looking for.
Okay. All right, let me, turn to the audience. Yes, sir. Would you like
What
to
was
say your
the-
name first?
Miles, what was the concern of the water quality?
I might defer to Trina. You want, yeah.
That's what he does.
So what they're saying is there's, they've tested the lake, they found PFAS, they don't wanna take the water and move it to another place and potentially contaminate the aquifer. They have to figure out if this is a problem or not. So in the, caution, you know, being cautious, they are not taking water from the lake right now. Luckily, the whole point of taking the lake water was to lower the lake. Luckily, the lake does not need to be lowered, if I'm understanding correctly.
So
Right?
does everyone's kind of well water within that region originate from that same?
I'm gonna hold that question till we get to the PFAS, but I think the question is, you're saying the wells around the lake, are they affected by the
Yes.
water quality and the PFAS? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
let's hold that question. Okay, good question. Anyone else in the audience? Yes, ma'am, back there.
It seems like if I'm hearing right, that Silver Lake, is almost at flood level now.
No, it is at the level where we start monitoring. So if we go back to that, very first.
No, I understand that now.
Oh, okay.
It just seemed to me that it's been summer, it shouldn't be close to.
Yes.
It's already, you know, a flood alert or whatever, oh, and there you go.
Right, so the Silver Lake 100-year water surface elevation flood level is 49.72. So we're well below that right now. So we're out ahead of it.
Okay, so you're almost 10 feet below.
Yes. But we are, yeah,
Monitoring.
yes. And it, question, no.
Where do you pump, and Denise Ross, where do you pump the water from Silver Lake? You say it's a pumping system. Where does that water go?
So there are locations behind the HESCO barriers that are like flooding parking lots and primarily parking lots of the businesses. So we're pumping them back over the HESCO barriers, and that's from flow that's coming down into, that would be getting into Silver Lake.
Doesn't that typically don't those, parking lots and such drain into the drains and end up in Swan Lake?
No, this is the Silver Lake Basin.
And none
And
of
is
that
it
water
separate?
goes-
I think that's her
Yeah,
question.
those boundaries, Swan Lake, Basin, Silver Lake Basin, White's Lake Basin, those are separate boundaries.
And is there a point, I recall, there was a contention that they connect at some point, so do they ever connect?
I can,
That very-
I can make a comment on
Yeah,
that. So,
okay.
so during like a 500-year event, which we
Yes.
haven't seen, is there an overflow path? Yes.
Okay,
You know,
But
that's more of a
it's very-
geologic timeframe. There is one single catch basin out there, and the lake would have to get fuller than we've seen it ever, including the recent flooding. It would have to get fuller to where it could take a portion off top.
and it would overtop.
It would go to Swan Lake. We haven't even seen that. Is it possible? It's possible. I'm
Okay.
just pointing out, but they're, other than that, they're not connected.
Okay. Another question?
Yes, Danny Cletus. Have you guys fixed your leaky sewer pipe yet? Nobody seems to know where the water comes and leaks into your guys' sewer pipes. That gets put to your sewer, then pumps into
Yeah,
our lake.
and I could, if it would help, I could talk a little bit about our I&I program. I don't know if we want to go that route through now, if we're just at a high level. Yeah, so we have a program at the city for looking at inflow and infiltration into our sewer system. So that's something that's ongoing. We've actually got a study, I think, coming to city for city council consideration, in the very near term, another phase. So that's ongoing work. We have done some things for the sewer shed that drains to the Reno State Water Reclamation Facility in terms of some lining of some manholes, some items. We could take it further, and we don't necessarily have the resource to go out and line our whole system, right? But pinpointing where it's most important. It's Silver Lake, for example, and that's probably might be one of the areas you're thinking of, which is also we're thinking, yeah, is there some things that could be improved, is being looked at.
And you say it's coming to council?
Well, there is an item, I believe, Trina, for additional I and I.
Yes, an INI study or flow monitoring study. Yeah.
It's already coming down, okay.
Did you have something to add, John?
Just the work was completed in that Silver Lake area in 2018.
18?
So,
Okay.
yeah, so some examples were lined with that time when we saw some infiltration.
And I also heard some conversation about maybe this is Swan Lake where the manholes were elevated.
Mhm.
And is that in Swan Lake?
Yeah, Councilmember, I just would quickly add on to that, the Washoe County collection system, we did several things, over the years. We also have INI programs. We also do manhole lining, repair of pipes, those types of things. But specifically when Swan Lake was initially flooding, we had a series of manholes that were lower, that were under the water basically. And ultimately, when the lake reduced in level, allowed us to get out there, we raised the barrels. So that's why you see those raised manholes out there to really effectively reduce the amount of INI that comes in during lake flooding.
And for everyone again, INI stands for,
Flow and infiltration.
okay, and this is a something that occurs with every sewer system, right? You're always gonna have a leaky pipe and you've gotta have ways to stop that leak, line the pipes, raise the manholes to keep groundwater and other rainwater out of your sewer system.
You're absolutely right. It's a huge issue in the South Lake Nice. Just as
I do know that. It's a huge issue in the south, more than in the north, I think.
And for the record, John Flansburgh.
Yeah,
Be clear, when we talk about leaky pipes, we're talking about groundwater that's above the pipe, and so you have hydrostatic pressure, it's leaking in the pipe. It's not that it's leaking out.
right. Yeah, we have water leaking in, which we then have to treat at the plant,
Yes.
which increases the cost for treatment for everything. Okay, well, listen, I know that this next topic is update on the lake levels at Swan Lake. Who is doing that? Oh, you are.
I am,
Okay.
and this could be quite brief. We could show a
Okay.
graph and maybe.
All right, just-
discussion points.
Show us a graph.
Right
Oop,
there.
sorry.
So you see, so Swan Lake current water level 4920. And I think what's interesting to point out is where we're at going.
I'm sorry, Joe, could you just center us, like, what time scale is this and what elevations are we talking about?
Yeah, so this is going back to, beginning of when we started experiencing flooding 6 years ago, approximately, right? 2017. So this is January, goes back to November of 16. So January of 17. That was kind of the big one of the really 3 severe winters. that we
And
had.
how high, how high are we talking?
Yeah, so in here, I don't recall exactly, but this is 23 and a fraction. And a quarter approximately. You could see then in 2019, Swan Lake actually got higher than it did in that initial year. It's because there was already water being stored in the lake. And we can talk about that certainly as well. If you look at the drawdown period, it's during the summertime. Evaporation is the primary loss. We also, as the city, we're operating the dewatering facility. You can see this was a really dramatic decrease here. Probably a lot of factors, but there was definitely some improvements because of the fact that the dewatering was in place. What I want to point out here is, the drop from the peak of the winter to where we're at now, heading back, peak, I guess, really spring, summer. That's June, into where we're at now, which is it's October. You don't see quite as much of a decrease, so there's somewhat less. And we had a really wet spring, and we had a lot of rainfall in the summer. So
The green areas are the precipitation, the orange line across the average precipitation. And I think what's really important, Joe, as you point that out, is the increase in the lake of over 6.5 feet of vertical elevation just this year based on the winter that we had. And that's a
yeah, so Joanne's pointing from this it's a dramatic difference in elevation from being low here to high. If you compare that to some of our other cycles here.
And how many feet is that, Joe? Because we can't read that.
Yeah.
from
6.5.
Yeah, that's 6.5.
here. Okay, so just this winter, just spring, it came up 6.5 feet, is what you're saying. Okay.
Why does water still keep going up Idaho and going up in the ditches along Lemon Drive when there's not been any rain, so to speak? There's been water water that's been laying there. It's gone nowhere. Can anybody answer that? Like,
Is this
the
water,
lake
is it,
leaking?
is it at the same elevation of the lake approximately? Is this the water, you're talking about just the lake water itself? Is that? That might be more of a water kind.
Yeah, I think what Denise was talking about is that, certain areas and certainly in response to some of the flooding, we've, excavated out the roadside ditches, certainly up in the north areas. And when we excavate out those ditches, sometimes those ditches are dug a little bit deeper than the flow lines of the two pipes, right? And so when you excavate out deeper than the flow lines of the two pipes, because of the clay soils in the area, and we have a precipitation event, rain, some of these, it could even be a lot of discharge from properties that we've seen. That water will stand down in the bottom of the ditches in between the flow line of the pipes. Again, if you've got two pipes and you excavate out more in the bottom, and that water will tend to stand there. That's not a good practice. It's not a good practice. But that is sometimes the reason. The other thing is that the area is very flat. And so we see areas on the north side as well as on the east side where it's almost impossible to really affect drainage because of the flatness of the developments, because of the flatness of those areas. And so water that does enter those ditches, again, for a variety of purposes or reasons, it doesn't have the ability to effectively move out quickly. And so it takes a while for that water to do that.
Let me ask our council members, any questions from these three speakers? And then we're gonna transition to our PFAS conversation. Councilmember Ebert, anything at this time? Okay, Councilmember Taylor?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much. That was very informative, and it looks like, I didn't hear the answer, but are we looking at a wetter winter or drier winter, or are we worried about the lake here?
This is, you want some dice?
What's that?
This is that, you want some dice?
Well,
Let me 3%, weather, 33% dry, 33%.
okay, well, I know in Tumwa, and I saw we had Tumwa staff here, they venture to make predictions every year around this time about what kind of a winter we're gonna have, so maybe that's gonna be coming, Mr. Enlund. Not today, but I mean at our Tumwa meeting.
Like Dwayne said, it's everybody's.
Oh, come on, that is not the way it goes. You guys are pretty good prognosticators, or at least you try. We're gonna transition, now over to the PFAS conversation, with Scott, is it Rico? Rico, thank you. You wanna join us? And then did you wanna come up too, Kim, or did you have any words to say?
No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I don't really have a lot to say, just want to get introduced.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Oh, sorry. Kim Rigdon, I'm the Western Regional Water Commission Program Manager. And as I was directed by with all the PFAS conversations by the Western Regional Water Commission to work with the regional partners and bring a PFAS expert in to not only teach us a little bit more about PFAS and where it comes from and what we're gonna do moving forward, but really we need a technical consultant on board that understands what's happening nationwide with all the issues. And so we felt like bringing that technical expert in would help the regional partners, help advise us a little bit more on some of the national trends and what we're doing.
And just for everyone in your planning, this is gonna be our last presentation for today and our last topic. So we're gonna hold items B6 and B7. After this item, we're just gonna take any final public comment. The rest of the agenda, but it's basically, is there any final public comment? So we'll leave a few minutes at the end, but the rest of the time, in my view, is for you.
Thank you.
Well, first, who are you? Where do you work? What do you?
So I'm with Jacobs. We're a multinational engineering company. We have local presence here in Reno. I am not physically in Reno. I'm based out of Syracuse, New York. I bring about 35 years of engineering experience, both on the environmental remediation investigation side as well as water treatment. Last 10 years or so, I've been focused on emerging contaminants and specifically PFAS. So a lot of what we're doing as a company is investigation work, like the support here, But in areas where water treatment's required, we're also doing water treatment for public utilities as well. So I wanted to cover quickly some PFAS 101, talk about the PFAS samples that have been collected in the North Valleys, discuss a little bit about the regulatory updates and then potential next steps. So just to preface, this is the initial discussion. I realize that PFAS could go for hours and we have about 22 minutes. So just want to, I guess, hit the highlights and we can go from there. Next one. So what are PFAS? I had a conversation before we started. Is it PFAS, PFOS? So the general acronym that people use is PFAS, PFAS, stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. A couple big takeaways on this slide, especially given the conversations that occurred earlier. One is they were invented back in the 1930s. These are man-made compounds that have no natural occurrence. They've been used since the 50s for many products, and that's very important because when you look at the pictures there, I want to highlight that if you're in a room with paint, I heard somebody mention Sherwin-Williams. Paint has PFAS in it, so we have PFAS likely in this room. It's in the carpet treatment for your stains. So if you're in your house and you have Stain Master and your liquid sits on top of your carpet, it's because there's PFAS in it. It's in food packaging, it's in cosmetics. If you have cosmetics on or skin treatment on, very likely there's probably some level of PFAS in it. So the biggest takeaway from a PFAS standpoint is that, yes, we've in some cases, we found it in the environment. In some cases, we found it naturally in our water, but you can't discount the fact that we've been using this for almost a half a decade as consumers. And so the properties that make it very important in terms of going out and camping and staying dry because you have your Gore-Tex on, those same properties also make it, concerning of what we're looking at when we find it in the environment. We find PFAS when I say we, globally, the research has shown that there's really not a person in the world that doesn't have PFAS in their blood due to how much we've been using it in society. Next slide. So what are the concerns with PFAS? On the chemical side, when you talk about dealing with it in terms of understanding it and how to treat it, it's not one single contaminant like we've had in our water systems before, like arsenic, for example, right? This is a family of compounds and they all have different health effects and they all have different treatment capabilities. As I mentioned, it's used everywhere, right? So this isn't about what may be in the environment. That's obviously what we're talking about. But the fact is that it has many beneficial uses, and it's probably one of the most difficult products to get out of our consumer cycle. If you guys remember back in the 80s, when chlorinated solvents were a thing, and we realized that we were using it in dry cleaning. Well, if you go to the dry cleaners, stop using it. Generally, problem solved very quickly. This is a much more complicated process because we use it everywhere. And because of those properties, it's, they're recalcitrant, they're persistent, they don't break down naturally in the environment. On the environmental and regulatory side, there is some evidence of health concerns at environmental levels. I want to stop and talk to this point a little bit because one is that most of the studies that have been done on humans are very focused on worker exposure levels, which aren't environmental levels. The focus on the environmental levels is a very difficult thing to ascertain when you look at the human population studying what's happened to one human or another, because like I said, everybody generally has some level of it in their bloodstream. You can't go to an unaffected population and do a study on them. Most of the focus of what we're seeing is potential health effects are non-cancer health effects. The reason that the EPA is coming out with a a drinking water regulation is mainly around things like increased cholesterol, potential immunosuppression. The cancer is really limited, first of all, very limitedly to specific cancers. And secondly, very limited to only PFOA, one of the two of the more commonly studied and, been around a long time, PFAS. So PFOA is the one that is suspected as a carcinogen. It is not a known carcinogen, but that is what is driving some of the research by EPA. The pathways for exposure, as we talked about, most of it is inhalation and ingestion. Ingestion is really food wrappers and other ways that, we have packaged and utilized PFAS, and we actually ingest it into our bodies. The EPA, when they have established their drinking water health advisories, assume that 80% of your body burden is through what you inhale from dust in your house, from carpet dust. Only 20% of it is the body burden from the drinking water. So there's multiple pathways of exposure, but the primary concern is inhalation and ingestion. And most of that really is from indoor space environments. And lastly, I want to just focus on, what we know and don't know. It's very much a rapidly evolving science. We probably hear as much fiction as we do fact. In getting to the facts about PFAS is very important because the science is evolving every day. And the regulations are evolving. We don't have a lot of regulations on PFAS right now, and this is the start of where the regulations are beginning. Next slide. Very complicated slide, but just to emphasize two things. This is not a new contaminant. This is a contaminant that's been around for almost 100 years. What's new is our ability to detect at these low levels and to find it in places that we didn't know we were actually using it. The other big takeaway, as you can see from that chart up there, is that there's over 10,000 individual PFAS compounds in that family. Not all of them do we measure. Right now, we measure 29 in drinking water. We measure 40 in non-drinking water. But we don't really know a lot of the impacts of some of those other PFAS. We just, as a society, as a world society, we just don't have the data on it. Most of them are considered shorter chains, and they might not affect the body nearly as much as the ones that we're, focused on and concerned with in our regulations. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that is, that's the major takeaway from the left. The major takeaway from the right is they're still widely produced and used. It's not just about what was dumped in the ground, from a historical usage point. We're still using them every day, and I try like heck to get my daughter to not use microwave popcorn, but she still does it anyways.
So you would recommend we don't use microwave?
Yeah. I think she's finally at that point where she believes me. She's 20. Next slide. So why are they in drinking water? This is a national perspective. This is not specifically to this area, but just in general. I know some of these may apply. Fire training areas, military sites, this really came up as an issue that started with the AFFF. The firefighting foam is what they consider the aqueous film forming foam. And it wasn't until we started to investigate the military sites that we realized we were using it everywhere else. And that's really been an unfolding over the last 5 to 6 years. The second is industrial releases, whether it's a discharge from an industry or even just a release. One of the first PFAS projects I worked on almost a decade ago was a chemical storage area at a plastic facility that had leaked PFAS, PFOA specifically, out of a storage tank, more of an environmental concern. And then there's a lot of data out there in terms of, if there's a concern with leaching of the PFAS from the biosolids. We know it's in our wastewater treatment plants because we use it every day and we flush it down the drain, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, and that may be another potential environmental source, if you will. Again, why are they in the wastewater? You know, they could be from industries discharging under a permit, you know, to either industrial wastewater discharge that goes to the wastewater reclamation facility. There's a lot of water reclamation facilities that take landfill leachate. We've disposed of these products for 50 years now, and that we see that we see it coming out in the landfill leachate, different PFAS components in landfill leachate, but primarily for non-industrial impacted wastewaters. It's because we use them every day. Wastewater reclamation facilities do not produce PFAS. They receive PFAS and they tend to pass it through. And the reason they pass it through is, this is a bit of a technical slide, but this basically lists every general type of treatment process that we use either in our water systems or our wastewater systems. The three that are highlighted in blue are the only three technologies we're using right now. Reverse osmosis membrane systems. I know you guys are talking a lot about your advanced, water reclamation facility. That's a very good technology for PFAS. And then the other two are absorption technologies, not new to the process. We use them in drinking water for taste and odor or nitrate removal, but they have application for PFAS treatment as well. So what do we know about PFAS in this area? I'm going to go through all the different groups of samples that have been collected and briefly discussed. So American flat site, there were soil and crop samples taken, as indicated in the blue circle there. There were soils, there were crops, and we conducted, using those data, we conducted an initial risk analysis using those measured concentrations, in developed models that our human health and ecological risk assessors use. They identified, given the concentrations that were there, that there is no risk when you look at the translation from the PFAS in the soils to the alfalfa into the potential grazing horses. From an ecological perspective, that same calculation was done with a model that looked at the translation from soil to cattle, either for dairy or beef, and there would be no risk from the consumption as a human from those animals grazing on that type of concentration that were detected in those fields. So for the next area there, there's two monitoring wells that were sampled, both at there's monitoring wells, the groundwater samples, as well as the soil samples. These are located very adjacent to an airport in the industrial area. Just looking at the data, and we've just done an initial review of the data, it's really unsure that PFAS source, but knowing that there's an industrial component and an Air Force component there, those could be potentially likely sources. The fire training area, the USGS fire training area, again, groundwater and soil samples were collected at that location. There are elevated PFAS in that region, specifically at those sample points, typical of AFFF usage, which lines up with the usage of that being a fire training area. There hasn't been an investigation yet done to look at the extent or distribution of that PFAS. So we know it's in that area. We're not certain at this point, how widely distributed that is. At Risworth, there were samples collected both at the treatment plant effluent, upstream and downstream of where that's discharged. The values in the effluent were very typical of a domestic usage. We definitely see a difference in PFAS concentrations in wastewater treatment plants when there's an industrial contribution. There was a very detailed study that was done a few years ago in Michigan. That's a public study, and they looked at wastewater treatment plants that clear industry connected to them, wastewater treatment plants that did not. So there's a lot of data that's being generated to understand that. And given what we've seen in these data, they're not impacted, doesn't appear to be impacted by any industrial sources. So they're very typical of what we would see every day if we're just using PFAS in our household. The upstream sample was actually higher than the downstream sample. Or I shouldn't say the downstream sample. The upstream sample was actually higher than the discharge of Risworth. So that's suggesting that Risworth, from a dilutional standpoint, is actually providing less PFAS, because when we looked at the low values of PFAS in the Risworth, it's definitely lower than what is coming by it from upstream. And we know upstream is, adjacent to some sources, which we'll talk about, potential sources. So the terminal lake, Silver Lake, the culvert that goes in between the two lakes, and then Swan Lake. The surface water samples were collected. Silver Lake is lower than the culvert or Swan Lake. So the culvert is adjacent to industrialized areas. Now, what I'll say is, when you look at, okay, what's the rate, what does the PFAS concentration mean that we've detected? What I'll say is that these are non-recreational water bodies. They're non-fishable surface waters. There is no national guidance related to water that isn't either direct recreation for people being in it or for fishing. The only guidance that's out there is Wisconsin has a limited guidance value, but it's only focused on fish consumption. And they have two different values, one that's focused on fish consumption and one that's focused on a child accidentally ingesting water during swimming. So it's very difficult to use those data to compare to these lakes, because they're not fishable surface waters, and they're not, they're not recreational water bodies. Liverworth, the values are very, again, typical domestic sewage, very similar in concentration to Risworth. The receiving pond, also, if you look at where that location is, there's a receiving pond, and then Swan Lake. The receiving pond has very similar concentrations as the water reclamation facility discharge. In looking at the elevations, we haven't done a detailed study on this yet, but I would imagine there's a lot of interaction between the Swan Lake water and the receiving pond. So in concentrations didn't look drastically different between Swan Lake, the receiving pond, or Risworth, or Liverworth rather. So what's going on nationally, especially with EPA, a whole bunch of categories here. So on the drinking water side, there's a thing called contaminant candidate list, CCL5. The big takeaway there is that it was finalized last October. That's to guide the next bullet there, which is what water utilities do to sample for what's considered unregulated contaminant monitoring. The takeaway is that there's more PFAS listed there. So, EPA is going to continue to focus on not just this round of investigation, but likely further rounds of investigation. TOMWA has participated, like other utilities across the nation, with UCMR5, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, sampling program number 5. I've reviewed some of those data that have been collected the first 2 rounds, and there were no concerns of being above even potential draft MCL regulations nationally in the North Valleys. Maximum contaminant levels, which we're all anticipating the EPA releasing, should be as early as the end of this December, maybe as late as March, from what I have heard. I've heard no indication from our contacts at Capitol Hill or anything I've heard through trade agencies to say that there'd be any changes compared to what we've seen in the draft. Not to say there won't, but I haven't heard any that there would. Environmentally, I want to point out that you could look at some of the surface water bodies And you know, maybe one potential criteria would be aquatic life criteria that's been released by the EPA. I'd also like to point out that compared to the nanograms per liter that we're looking at in the drinking water, in what we're detecting in the surface water bodies, EPA has determined that their ppb or ppm, meaning that they're 1,000 times to 1,000,000 times higher, their criteria would be than what we're detecting in the water. So their threshold for protection of the aquatic life that they've studied is 1,000 to 1,000,000 times higher than what we're seeing environmentally in the North Valleys area. The last thing is NIPDs. Some questions were brought up about, you know, removing discharges. Well, right now there are no regulations for PFAS in wastewater discharge. The EPA has issued memos to states to potentially look as a program, not as a rule, but has issued as a program to basically conduct a pollutant minimization plan, look for point sources. And the EPA has actually just issued a memo to a number of water reclamation facilities to collect data over the next 6 months or so, I believe, to understand how much PFAS is coming into the wastewater plant and if there's specific industrial sources. So the whole point to that bullet is that there are no regulations right now. The EPA is starting with the drinking water first, as we see. There is continued progress with wastewater, but it's essentially at its infancy right now. So next steps for us as collectively with Jacobs, with the collective body here, we're just starting to review, as I pointed out, some of the available data. Once we do that in a much more detailed manner, we can identify potential data gaps to gather additional data, prepare a sampling plan. Things that may come out of those efforts may be, you know, communication support, plan development, and action plan development. But this is certainly the first step of many steps that would likely occur over some time. So that's,
Wow, that is a lot.
yes, it is a lot.
That's a lot to take in, but you've given us the 101, what
Right.
these things are. You've talked to us about the distribution. You actually looked at the data from our area. And you didn't see red flags, or you did? I didn't hear that.
Did not see any red flags.
Okay, and then you talk about a future sampling program. When or who would fund that, or who would do that, or what's that about?
That's a good question for you to answer now. We would, that is a second phase, and this work that we'd be working with Mr. Rico on with the regional partners. So we would want to get together with City of Reno, City of Sparks, Washoe County, and make sure that we understand where everybody needs to coordinate and collaborate on what that sampling plan would look like,
Okay.
where it's needed, and how that would move forward.
Okay. So let me go back again to the middle point I made. I think you said that there's no national standard. So when you look at these numbers, it's hard to say, are they bad or okay or concerning, right?
Right.
You don't have anything to judge them against, or do you? Like you said, there's a draft number. Maybe.
So let me clarify that, yeah, there's a draft number for drinking water, specifically
Okay.
drinking water.
And what is that? Can you tell us? Or?
So for PFOA and PFOS specifically, those are 4 nanograms per liter.
Okay.
There's 4 other compounds that are included in the draft MCL that I won't rattle them off here, but they're also grouped together as a hazard index.
Okay. So you take them together, you look at them
Right.
together.
Yeah.
Okay. And so did you see stuff that was over 4 nanograms per liter?
Environmentally, in certain locations, yes.
Okay.
In the drinking water samples that were collected under UCMR 5, no.
No, okay. Well, let me ask Councilmember Taylor, did you have some questions about this?
No, I don't have any questions.
And we're gonna be hearing a lot. This is our first presentation. We're gonna hear about this again on Wednesday at our Western Regional Water Commission, and I'm sure we're gonna hear this in different settings and environments. Councilmember Ebert, nothing right now. Okay, let me ask our audience here. Yep, let me first go to Here, yeah.
Our well,
You say your name.
Jody School. Our well is right across Lemon Drive from Swan Lake, less than a half a mile from Swan Lake. Would you drink water out of a well that close to Swan Lake?
I can't answer that because I don't know the hydrogeology. What I can answer, maybe John can comment on this as well, is that there are two Comwell wells that are right adjacent to the lake that are not detached.
One's right across from us.
Right, and that is, well, I don't know which one's across from you, but the wells that I looked at are non-detect. And
But that means you cannot detect the.
the PFAS, right, low, below the proposed drinking water standards and below analytical detection. It all has to do with hydrogeology, which I haven't looked into and I'm not a qualified expert to. I would ask one of our colleagues, one of my colleagues to do that, but it all has to do with confining layers and, what flows from the lake to, and where the well streams are and what depth is at.
It sounds like from a PFAS perspective, it's probably okay, but I don't know what else is in your well water, or if you get it.
Yeah.
Did you also have a question? Sam?
Yes, ma'am, Miles Pool. I'm just wondering, they obviously shut down the pumping and irrigation to feed cattle with this water.
Well, if they grow alfalfa, it potentially be, yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So apparently it wasn't good enough to feed animals.
So my understanding, and, who was here from our team on that, but, okay, Trina.
We shut that down, prior to bringing Jacobs on as our consultant to help us understand what the concentrations were, and then doing the study for Tomahawk, particularly on the farm. So now that we have him, they're, maybe pathways forward to continuing that, but out of an abundance of caution, we shut it down before we knew it.
It's not because we knew something bad, but we didn't want to take any chances whatsoever. That was my understanding.
So follow question. I'm not sure, is there a, can we take our water somewhere in the city, county and have it tested?
Great question. Do we know?
You can definitely test it through an analytical lab. Typically the analysis runs about $250 to $300.
Right.
I'm not sure of lab specific in the area, but that's something I could definitely follow up and provide information. There's also a screening level test that is available for $15 or $20 through a company called Cyclopure.
About 90, John, I know about 90.
Oh, 90, okay.
Well, we've done the Home Depot test.
Yeah, I don't know if I trust that. But
It's for nitrates, basically.
yeah, that won't pick up PFAS, but there is a PFAS specific home test that a company Cyclopure offers for about $90 to $100. It's a small sample kit that you pour your water through and then send the media back to them and they'll analyze it. I know that Tom was done somewhat of a rudimentary study between the samples that they've collected in utilizing that, and they have a pretty decent correlation. It's not a certified analysis, but they've shown to have, at least locally here, a decent correlation.
And
Enough to
John,
give you
did you
good
have
pass
something
fail.
to add, or did you?
I was just gonna add that on the website, there's Cyclopure, if anybody wants to.
And then, did you
Yeah,
have something?
who are you retained by
We are retained
specifically?
by
The Western Regional
Western
Water.
Region.
No, who are you retained by to be taking these samples?
Yeah, by,
I'm not taking any samples.
Oh,
I'm
because
reviewing data.
you were referring to we whenever you talk about taking samples and stuff, so I was wondering.
No, we have taken those
who you were
samples.
retained by, so it's Western Regional.
yeah,
What?
so just a quick comment. Western Regional Water Commission is a body that was set up, I'm gonna say 20 years
Yeah,
ago.
no, I'm.
What's that?
2007.
2007. So we asked them, very concerned for the community, we're looking at water for the whole community. We asked him to retain an expert to advise all of the government agencies about this project. And so right now you're reviewing existing data,
Right.
and then we're gonna talk about collecting new data.
Okay, but I'm just asking who you are asking the questions of, because you said a number of times that this wasn't drinkable, it wasn't recreational, and it wasn't, source of environment, right? But no, I've got 1,000 times of us being told that that water is recreational quality. There are no signs that tell any of us not to swim in it. So I'm just wondering if it's not recreational, why are they, or if they're telling us that it's recreational water quality, why aren't they telling me that?
Well, I mean, Kim, I don't
And
think
shouldn't
it's
there be
labeled.
signs?
I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that question. That would be.
Shouldn't
Okay,
there
we're
be
gonna have to
signs?
follow up on that. Denise.
Yeah, and then the thing about Sherman-Williams and, the paper factory and stuff like that, and you keep saying, well, you don't really know where it's all coming from. Well, can it all be contributing?
Very likely, and that's, there could be factions that are part of the whole puzzle.
Then- then-
Well, if Sherwin-Williams is discharging in industrial discharge to the water reclamation facility, we saw no evidence of that being impacted by industrial levels of PFAS. If they're releasing through surface runoff or stormwater direct into the creek, that could be another area that could be looked at,
We don't
for
know,
future studies.
which is why we're gonna talk at Western Regional Water Commission about, do we need to do some additional study?
Maybe some additional investigations. I'll show you a few pictures afterwards.
Let me ask, that we're coming to our end, we're over time, so let me, yeah, go ahead.
With the American Flats issue,
Mhm.
you said it was not that bad. When that first started up, there was dead horses and very sick horses. And there was very sick horses that didn't eat that crappy hay. They were just around the area, and from the spray of the sprinklers, they got sores. They had birth effects or stillborns with their colts and fillies. So what do you think about that?
At the levels that we saw, I can't imagine that there's a direct correlation.
Because now, if you've taken the test the last couple of years, they've been taking it out of our aquifer. They haven't been using the lake.
You mean the water for the alfalfa?
Yep.
It's coming out of the aquifer.
Yep.
Yeah,
Because last year, the lake was down low enough where they couldn't pump out of the lake. Their intake for that pump was out of the water for almost half the summer.
so lots of questions. I think that's something, I hope that you come and participate at Western Regional Water Commission. Because we're certainly gonna be talking about, what have we found and what do we need to study, you know? So is there one, final question here? I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand. There's a lot, this is the very first, to my knowledge, kind of community presentation that we've had on the issue of PFAS. So the staff may have talked to each other or gotten some information from somewhere else. But to my knowledge, this is the very first, and I'm very appreciative of you coming on board. And participating and being willing to work with us on this. There's a lot of concern. I mean, we have our attorney here, and I'll just say that I think Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County have all entered into, do you want to just say, John, it's our legal counsel.
Yeah, just for the record, John Shipman, City Attorney's Office, all three jurisdictions have entered, including the airport, have entered into special counsel arrangements with a law firm and a syndicate of law firms that does this nationally. So, that's to, there's been some litigation currently with some of the bigger players, DuPont, some of the big chemical companies, and that's potentially creating the opioid settlements, the ability to get money locally for projects that would help alleviate potential.
Okay, good to know. So we've all teamed together, hired the same attorney firm or group of firms to address it. Let me ask at this time, we're obviously over time. Have we said what we can say here today? Do you have any wrap up for us?
I know, I just really appreciate this on board.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a huge help.
Yeah.
Technical assistance.
You know, information's power. We just haven't known. We haven't known what the levels are. We haven't had anybody tracking what's happening nationally. I mean, in a formal way. We haven't put a plan of study together to find out how big or deep our potential issues are here. So all of this is yet to come. We're really just starting. Thank you so much for being here and late night meeting, we know, but it's a good kind of meeting and people that really care. You know, this is really affecting their community potentially, and so we all have to stay informed. We're gonna wrap up our meeting and we're gonna close out this item and move on to C, which is board commission committee member reports and announcements, and I'll start with Councilmember Taylor. Do you have anything under C?
I do not.
And then Councilmember Ebert, anything? Not at this time. Are there things that either of you would like to see for future agenda items? In other words, we have some things to talk about that we cannot talk about today. And we want to come back and talk about those things. The update on development, the stormwater basin inspection program, what's happening out at the plant. That's a lot to talk about still.
I would just like ongoing updates on these things. You're not one and done.
Right.
Whether it's ongoing,
Okay.
updates on the roads, that's ongoing, feedback, that's ongoing. So we just,
Yeah.
keep
Keep us current.
Yeah.
That's good. What about you, Commissioner Taylor? Councilmember?
No.
Okay, so we still have a lot to talk about in future meetings and we'll be back. We'll get that scheduled. We're gonna close out future agenda items and move to final public comment. And let me ask if there is any final public comment. We've talked all through the meeting, so we've covered a lot of territory. Mr. Cole?
My name is Miles Poole. I live on Lemon Drive, right in between Arizona and Idaho. I'm kind of going back to what Dale had said about this Lemon Drive going on the berm. In between that berm and my house, there's a swamp basically now. I can see that being filled in. Am I gonna be looking at a tilt up in 5 years, 10 years? I have a pretty nice view of Peavine. Am I gonna be looking at a concrete tilt up,
Like a tilt-up building,
like they're doing up on
the warehouse.
North Virginia?
What we will do is when we come back, we have a whole update on development trends, and that certainly would be one. I will tell you, there's been a fair amount of development proposed in the area that you're speaking of, and also more to the south. And thus far, the Reno City Council has denied those permits, if I recall correctly. And what's that, three times? So that's some indication of how we feel about building in certain areas that are potentially wet, flood prone, or whatever. I mean, we've taken public action on that. But we can certainly dive into it in a future meeting. Okay. Okay, any other comment? Yes?
Kind of off the topic, but Reno is coming into our area. But yeah, we don't get to vote on anything for Reno. And I know probably laws and all that. And if there's a chance, can we have more input?
Yes.
Because we don't get to vote the mayor or council.
Right.
Or anything.
So there's a lot of areas, and this is one of these interfingering areas where we have city and county kind of doing this and coming up together. And all of this is a political boundary. It's not really about water, right? Water doesn't respect that boundary, or PFAS or any other kind of issue. So that is one reason we have this kind of meeting. And that is one reason too, why we've encouraged all of our NABs, which are city advisory boards, to include county members. Even if you can't vote, we want to hear your voice. I have several on my NAB. I don't know about the other NABs, but the opportunities there to have county members participate in NABs. And certainly there's no restriction on making public comment at our council meetings. We don't ask you where are you from, and you can only speak if you're from Reno, that kind of thing. It just doesn't apply. So I think generally, if you've got something important to say, we want to hear. So we're just trying to provide a variety of forums to have that conversation. Some are more formal, some are more informal.
Right.
Okay? Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
When county and city coming together.
Yeah.
Kind of just gotta sit back and think.
Well, I wouldn't phrase it as taking it. I would phrase it as this is the nature of every jurisdiction in America, is that there's a line somewhere between where is the
Right.
county and where is the city?
But if
And
the
they
city's
can be
making-
across the street from each other. Yeah,
But if the city's making decisions that impact us, we can
Yeah.
at least have some kind of,
that's one reason we set up this meeting seriously.
no, I mean, some kind of voting power.
Okay.
Because we gotta pay the taxes and things. I know, we're just out of the county.
Okay, well, hearing no other further public comment, I'm gonna ask my colleagues for a motion for adjournment. Move to adjourn. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn, and we are adjourned. All right, thank you,
Can I
everyone.
have
for
the
being
four of you fill out forms that asked questions that haven't yet filled it out,
Just make
please?
sure you've got your.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being so kind, Dan. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. How you doing, Mickey?
Oh, this is well past my bedtime. So I'm like, I am ready to be